Good morning. It's called to order. One, two, three. Okay. Good morning. This meeting is called to order. For the record, the time is 1:30 p.m. The date is July 1st, 2025. The commission and staff are appearing from Helena, Montana in the Bollinger Room of the Montana Public Service Commission. I am Brad Molnar. I'm the presiding chairman for this meeting. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. And to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, for the record, is Commissioner Pinocci online with us? Okay, Commissioner Pinocci is joining us online. To my immediate left is Commissioner Wellborn. To my immediate right is Commissioner Fielder, and next to her is Commissioner Bukacek. So we have a quorum. The Public Service Commission welcomes any comment on any item that is on today's agenda or any matter that is within the jurisdiction of the Public Service Commission. Are there any public commenters in the room? Okay. Please approach the microphone and hit the button so the green light comes on. Please state your name, spell your last name and address. There is no need to give your physical address, just the town you're from. Sir.
Jeremy Williams, Williams. I'm from Helena. So the reason I'm here is I'm a resident of North Star. We get to keep talking about that. I think that I'm just going to become a huge pain in your backside because this morning our water was out. We had no services. So at this point, I know that you all know that this has been a long-going thing. From our perspective as a North Star resident, mine as an elected member of our water board, we're sick and tired of it. And I am here basically asking, when are we going to get some meaningful movement on this problem? This is a utility that you guys regulate. I don't feel like anything's getting done. This has been years, 5, 6, 7 years that this is happening. And we need to get some meaningful movement on a resolution to this because it is getting ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. You guys are an elected board by us constituents. You had 282 people without water this morning. That's a basic human right, and we're not getting it. So at this point, I would implore you, I'd beg you, I don't know what else to do, pay you off. I'm sick and tired of it. Our residents are sick and tired of it. My phone blows up when this crap happens because I'm an elected member of our board, just like you're an elected member of this board. So at this point, we need some meaningful movement, not the crap that they've been doing. We need some meaningful movement from this body, and we need it to happen sooner than later. That's all I have to say.
Your frustration resonates.
Can I ask a quick question, just a clarification question, Mr. Williams?
Yeah, we're not allowed to enter into Q&A, but we can do clarification.
Yeah, you said that last time, but you know what? I'm sick and tired of it. I think that you guys are responsible to us, and we're not getting anywhere. You can sit there and say it's not Q&A, but I'm tired of it.
Mr. Williams, I just wanted to understand something you said, and that was that 282 people were without.
282 homes.
Okay. Okay.
Every single home in our neighborhood was without water this morning.
Completely without water.
Shut off.
Okay. That's all the homes in the
That is every single home.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Are there any others, any other public commenters that are here personally? If not, do we have any online? We do not have any online. So announcements of any have there been any changes to the agenda? We have not had any, we're not expecting any early or late arrivals for this meeting. Do we have a motion for approval of the minutes?
Mr. President, I move approval of the minutes for the week of June 23rd.
We have a motion for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of acceptance of the minutes of the last meeting, say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, same sign. The approval of the minutes passes 5-0. Now, work session issue number 2024.07.076, Northwestern Energy application to implement an annual natural gas tracking adjustment and to consider approving the interim rate adjustments for natural gas provided on or after July 1, 2025. Staff has joined us. Who's going to be the lead? Sir, Grant.
I'll be leading us off today, President Wilner,
Yeah.
Commissioners. Northwestern filed its application on May 31st, 2025. It's the natural gas tracker application with today we're discussing an interim rate to be effective today, July 1st. Northwestern proposes an increase in its natural gas supply rate for its residential, general service, and firm utility customers by 0.0399 per therm. The proposed supply rates are comprised of the purchased natural gas supply rate component and estimates of production-related taxes and royalty payments that vary depending on the amount of production and the index price of gas, including the production asset rates from Northwestern's current general natural gas rate case and the most recent property tax tracker. Northwestern additionally requests that its gas transportation adjustment clause over collection balance of $754,520 be amortized over the 2025-2026 tracker period. According to Northwestern, for a typical residential customer using 65 therms per month, Northwestern's proposed rates would result in an increase of $2.58 per month or $30.96 per year, which amounts to a $4.49% bill increase compared to the rate effective June 1st. The annual percent will depend on volumes, the price of gas, and customers' usage. I would reiterate that this is a supply tracker, and the primary reason for this increase is to have rates reflect projected load, supply, and related natural gas costs for the upcoming tracker period. Northwestern's requested interim rates are reasonable, and staff recommends approval. The proposed rates will reflect actual costs being realized, sending appropriate price signals to customers. With that, I will turn it over to Amanda.
Before you do that, Grant, Mr. President, there was something Grant said, and I don't think I heard it clearly. And that is you described the percentage increase. What was that number?
Correct, Vice President Fielder, it was a percentage increase of 4.49%.
Okay, is there an error in the staff memo that says 14.93%?
The 14.93% relates to the supply
Supply only?
component only.
Okay, so overall what is it?
4.49 for the total overall bill.
All right,
in
thank
fact.
you.
Commissioners, to follow up to Mr. Fink's presentation, I wanted to briefly go over the standards of review. The commission's decision must be based upon consistent standards appropriate for the nature of the interim request, which, as Mr. Fink mentioned, is a natural gas cost tracking adjustment. As always, rates must be just and reasonable. And if the commission's final order in this docket disapproves the requested rate increase, the commission may order the difference be refunded to ratepayers with interest. Finally, to note a few clerical edits on the first page of the draft interim order, the second paragraph should read that on June 26th, the commission issued a notice of application and intervention deadline, which set July 11th as the deadline to intervene in this docket. And the first part of the second sentence in paragraph 5 should read that according to Northwestern, the adjustments are needed to 1, reflect its projected load, supply, and related natural gas costs for the 12-month period ending June 30th, 2026. Thank you for your time, and we would be happy to take any questions.
I have a quick one. Either one of you can take it. You said there was a $750,000 over collection. How does that happen? Was the last tracker set too high, the estimates too high, or what happened there?
President Molnar, with the last tracker period, 2024 and 2025, the Northwestern tracks the GTAC balance. And so there was an over collection from that tracker period. And in this current tracker period, Northwestern will amortize it back to customers with a rate.
Okay, so is the over collection over the same time frame that the amortization will take place?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other question from commissioners? Commissioner Bukacek.
So I realize this is a routine type of case and routine type of docket, and you've answered all my questions satisfactorily, but I wanted to ask a few more, or in addition to the ones that I asked for the sake of the public to understand some of the information that's in here. Now, Northwestern discusses their balanced portfolio of fixed and index price supplies and company-owned production. Have those procurement guidelines, including hedging, been provided by this commission?
President Molnar and Commissioner Bukacek, the commission does have established hedging guidelines that it has used in previous cases and would use in this case to evaluate the prudence of Northwestern's fixed price purchases and balanced portfolio.
And as approved by the commission, gas supply costs are directly passed through to customers. Can you explain what that means and how it pertains to this case?
President Molnar, Commissioner Bukacek, the cost of gas is summed up in this tracker. And so the cost that Northwestern spends to acquire that gas is passed on to customers, which Northwestern files monthly reports with the commission, and that price changes monthly depending on the price of gas. So if price of gas increases, customers will see that reflection in their bills. If prices of gas decrease, they'll also see that reflection.
Maybe that's obvious. All right. So my last question. So Northwestern, in their analysis, they're using the accounting mechanisms of gas transportation adjustment clause, or GTAC, and unreflected gas cost account, UGCA. Now, those are approved procedures we use pretty much every year in these type of routine cases. Is that correct?
President Molnar, Commissioner Bukacek, that is correct. Northwestern's application and staff's assessment follows well-established procedures that have been outlined in their applicable tariffs and commission precedent.
Thank you.
Are there further questions or comments from commissioners? Seeing none, do I hear a motion?
I move to approve the requested rate adjustment on an interim basis beginning on July 1st, 2025, to issue the draft order as the commission's final interim order and to authorize staff to make non-substantive edits as needed.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second the motion, Mr. President.
We have a motion, we have a second. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in, pardon?
I just want to defend my motion,
Against all comers?
if I may. May I?
Please.
Okay. So as Ms. Webster talked about, for our part, the contract between Montana PSC and the utilities we regulate, we are to apply consistent standards appropriate for a given natural gas case in order to allow utilities to continue to supply adequate, reliable, life-sustaining natural gas at the most stable and best possible price that is just and reasonable. Based on the data provided in Luke Hansen's Exhibit LH2, the cost to the utility company has gone up for supplying natural gas. They have a right to recoup those costs. page 3, paragraph 11, and page 4, paragraph 14 of the draft order from our staff. Northwestern has demonstrated a clear basis for its interim requests, and deferred adjustments would result in rates that do not reasonably reflect Northwestern's current natural gas costs. If we didn't approve it, the interim requests are consistent with the criteria for interim rates and will result in overall rates that are just and reasonable for interim purposes.
A rousing defense it was. Are there any other questions or comments from commissioners on the moved and seconded motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
So motion passes 4-1. Well, I guess we'll move on to the,
Thank you.
yeah, you bet. Item number 3, internal policy manual, the IPM, to discuss the meaning and scope of section 2.5 of the delegation policy. I apologize. Item number 2, docket 2025.06.046, the Montana Dakota Utilities Company, Montana Dakota's application to implement a fuel and purchase power cost tracking adjustment to consider whether to issue an interim order approving Montana Dakota's requested fuel and power cost adjustment. Staff.
Good afternoon, President Molnar and Commissioners. My name is Brooke Umstead, and I'm a rate analyst in the Regulatory Division. On June 17th, 2025, in docket 2025-06046, Montana Dakota submitted its fuel and purchase power cost tracking adjustment pursuant to the terms of its Rate 58 tariff. This electric tracking mechanism was established to allow MDU to adjust base rates for monthly fluctuations in costs. These fluctuations are then trued up on an annual basis, which is what you see in this current application. Montana Dakota requests a total cost of fuel and purchase power of 1.867 cents per kilowatt hour for primary service customers and 1.91 cents per kilowatt hour for secondary service customers. Compared to supply rates currently in effect, this is a decrease of 0.485 cents per kilowatt hour, or approximately 20% for primary service customers, and a decrease of 0.49 cents per kilowatt hour, or approximately 20% for secondary service customers. The proposed rates include adjustments for the current fuel and purchase power cost adjustment, the unreflected fuel cost, and the PSC in Montana Consumer Council taxes. The new rates will be effective today, July 1st, 2025. And as a reminder, this is an interim, so rates are refundable with interest if the commission ultimately approves lower rates. Staff recommends approval of the draft interim order as presented with any necessary clerical edits, and I am available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments from commissioners?
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
I have one. The ratepayer may ask, what do you think caused the overestimation? Were they, what could they have done not to charge the higher rate to begin with? What kind of answer do you have for that?
That's a great question. Thank you, President Molnar, Commissioner Pinocci. So actually in the prior tracking period, right, so that July 2024 through June 2025, there actually was not a significant overcollection. The reason you're seeing this significant decrease is due to the prior unreflected adjustment in the prior year's docket was significantly higher due to a congestion issue in MDU's service territory. And so we're seeing rates go back down to those normal amounts due to congestion being a normal fee in this last tracking period. So just to be clear, there was a small overcollection, but it was not significant.
Thank you, Mr. President. If there are no more questions, I would support staff recommendation and make a motion to do so.
We have a motion to support staff recommendation. Is there a second?
I second.
We have a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to support staff recommendation, say aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Brooke. Item number 3, internal policy manual, IPM, to discuss the meaning and scope of section 2.5 of the delegation policy. Staff is moving forward. Gentlemen, who will be the lead on this?
Mr. President, Commissioners, I'll be the lead if you'll entertain it. This is a unique problem for the Commission to have. We're before you today to ask for clarification on the meaning of the Commission's policy on delegated authority, specifically the delegation of authority from the Commission to staff to approve uncontested rate schedules. And as used in the delegation policy, rate schedule is essentially synonymous, the same thing as a rate tariff. Tariffs are the shorthand that we use more often. So for this particular work session, what I'd propose to do is just very quickly run through some of the timeline of the circumstances that led to this ambiguity, and then leave it open for the Commission to discuss what you would like us to do. In this particular case, there is no staff recommendation, so that's worth noting at the front end. The request for clarification begins with the partial electric settlement that was filed in Northwestern Energy's general rate case on April 14th. Along with that partial electric settlement, Northwestern Energy and the other settling parties, which were not all the parties in the docket, filed a motion for the Commission to revise the interim rates effective for electric service. They had originally requested action on that and in a revised interim rate by May 1st. However, given the Commission's workload and the turnaround time required to schedule a work session on something like that, it was not addressed before May 1st. On May 16th, staff issued a memo recommending a particular outcome on Northwestern Energy's motion for revised interim rates. On May 19th, so just 3 days later, Northwestern Energy filed a notice withdrawing its motion for revised interim rates, effectively mooting the question that was addressed in that staff memo. As a result of that notice withdrawing the motion, on May 20th, the Commission canceled its work session that had been scheduled to address the motion for revised interim rates that would have adjusted those interim rates to the rates provided in the electric settlement agreement. After May 20th, 3 days later on May 23rd, the 9-month period provided in Montana Code Annotated Section 69-3-302 expired. And that statute allows a utility to self-implement a rate adjustment after the passage of 9 months if the Commission has not already acted on the request. So May 23rd was the date that Northwestern Energy self-implemented their originally requested electric rates, which are higher than the rates that they requested in the electric settlement agreement. Later, on June 9th, the first day of the hearing on Northwestern Energy's general rate case, CEO Brian Bird testified that Northwestern had uncovered some recent Commission precedent that interpreted Section 302, that same statute I mentioned before, to apply equally to the originally filed rates as the settlement rates. So the rates that Northwestern had proposed in its electric settlement agreement. And as a result of finding that precedent, Northwestern was willing to adjust its rates downward from the originally requested rates to the settlement rates. On June 20th, Northwestern Energy filed a tariff letter to that effect. I would note that they did not file a motion for the Commission's approval of revised interim rates. Rather, they just filed a tariff letter asserting that the rates should be adjusted pursuant to Montana Code Annotated Section 69-3-302. So the question for the Commission right now is whether staff can process those tariffs. And by process, I mean review them to make sure that they are factually correct, that they are authorized, and then stamp them as approved pursuant to the Commission's delegated authority policy. Whether or not you decide the filed tariffs are in fact uncontested rate schedules as used in that delegation policy will turn on whether or not the commission still wants to follow the precedent that Northwestern Energy found, that HLH case from 2019. So with that is a brief summary of how we got here. If commissioners have additional questions, I'd be happy to try to address them. And of course, we have your regulatory division administrator, Will Rosequist, here as well.
I have a question. So even the title of this I find confusing. Is what we're doing saying that staff should simply review for thoroughness and then accept the filings, or are we saying that the commission can give direction on this as opposed to staff making the decision?
I would characterize, Mr. President and Commissioners, the question for the commission is, can the staff process Northwestern's filed tariffs under the delegation of authority as an uncontested rate schedule? So is what Northwestern filed an uncontested rate schedule within the meaning of the delegation policy?
So if we say it is contested, then what's the next step?
Then staff would lack the authority to proceed with processing those tariffs, and we would have to schedule a subsequent work session if the commission would like to take it up on its own accord to process those rate schedules, not through delegated authority, but under your own authority. If you conclude, however, that they are uncontested rate schedules, then staff does have the authority to process them, and we would proceed pursuant to that delegation of authority.
Okay, so in reading your memorandums on this, I think you're pretty clear that even if something is contested, it does not affect the statute. Is that correct?
So that, yes, Mr. President and Commissioners, Section 302, the statute that you're referring to, simply allows a utility to implement the rates that they had originally requested. That is clear from the language of the statute. Regardless of whether the commission is still engaged in a contested case process, regardless of whether other parties to that contested case process have disputed their rate request, regardless of what the commission feels about the originally requested rates, that statute applies in such a way that it doesn't matter if anyone opposes it. The statute, it appears, is designed to protect the utility from delay in the process of handling a contested case and limiting the regulatory leg that's associated with that sort of delay.
So if we said that it's contested and therefore don't go forward, you're saying that that has no real effect because you're saying the law says that if it is contested, it doesn't make any difference. It still goes forward.
Mr. President, I'm not sure that I'm 100% following the question.
Don't feel so alone in that. I'm not.
I'll say this. It should not matter if you believe that statute applies, Section 302. If it applies to the tariffs that Northwestern Energy filed, then it doesn't matter whether other parties oppose those tariffs because the statute is agnostic to the opposition of other parties, right? If the statute applies to this circumstance, then you're correct. It would have to be considered uncontested for purposes of processing because Northwestern Energy would be permitted to implement those new rates.
Okay. So my concern on it is not whether it's contested or not. My concern is with the interpretation of the statute itself. To wit, it seems to me pretty clear by the plain wording of the statute that a new filing has to wait 9 months to see if the commission takes action. It is agnostic to, it really doesn't get into supplemental filings, but rather a new filing. And what we have before us is a new filing. So my view of interpretation of plain wording is the new filing would face the same 9 months as the original filing faced when it was a new filing. How then do I get that into this so that we're not coming back in a week? I don't mind coming back in a week, but it's not a matter of challenging. It's a matter of the interpretation of new filing.
Right. Mr. President, to answer your question as directly as I think I can, if Section 302 does not apply here because you've got a new tariff filing, then it would not be considered an uncontested rate schedule, right? It would not fall within that delegation of authority.
And then what happens?
If it's not permitted by the statute, then it goes back to the commission to consider whether or not you will approve an adjustment to the rates. Of your own authority to approve rates during the pendency of a rate case.
Okay. So, so far as interims go, we'll set interims aside for a second. You're saying the rate case, the big rate case, which could take 4 or 5 months yet before we get a final ruling on that. Pretty easy. So in the case of an interim, if the commission allowed this to go forward based on 9 months, because it is a new ruling, a new request, and therefore we would be accepting the filing and the 4 documents that go with it. How do we put that into the record? Do we not do it now? Do we come back in a week and discuss it? What is the process for getting into the interpretation from a commission point of view?
Mr. President and Commissioners, if your conclusion is that the statute doesn't apply, and because the statute does not apply, it is not an uncontested rate schedule, that would be a reasonable interpretation of the policy that you could make today.
Okay. I think I'll do that. I just don't know what to do afterwards because the suggested recommendation really doesn't seem to apply to anything as to whether or not it's uncontested. So if it's okay with all here gathered, I'll say what I think the ruling should be.
If I may as well,
Sure.
Mr. President, the work session request form was filled out at the beginning of last week before staff had a time to digest and prepare for today's presentation. So it's a placeholder, and I, of course, appreciate your direction to staff that was made subsequent to that work session request being filed, that we not prepare a recommendation for the commission.
Okay. And
Mr. President, on that
Please.
point, I have a very stern objection.
Okay.
Because you do not have the power to direct our staff not to provide a recommendation. The power for that comes from either the staff or the management, and management is defined as a number of people. So I want to go to why. I mean, not why. I admonish you for directing staff because that was not proper direction given. You do not have that power. But number 2, I want to ask staff what their opinion and what their recommendation is that we do not have, because there should be an opinion or a recommendation before this commission today from staff, or you can correct me if I'm wrong. Would staff have made a recommendation? And if you wouldn't have, that's up to you. But if the president hadn't directed you not to make a recommendation, do you have a recommendation to present to this commission today?
Mr. President and Vice President Fielder, so we're operating under a couple of different policies that are relevant here, right? The Code of Conduct policy discusses the importance of staff independence. Specifically, Section 2.6.4 says that before staff completes work on a recommendation, management may direct subordinate staff to forego making a recommendation on matter. Additionally, the Commission's administration policy defines the term management to include division heads as well as commission leadership. So correct me if I'm wrong in my interpretation of the policy, but when the policy says that management can direct subordinate staff not to make a recommendation, and management is defined to include commission leadership, then indeed commission leadership can make that direction to subordinate staff not to make a recommendation. Do I understand that correctly?
Mr. President, Mr. Hamilton, management is a group of people, and subordinate staff are found in the reporting chain. So the only staff that is subordinate to commission leadership is the executive director. So if the executive director then told her subordinate staff not to provide a recommendation, that would be proper. But commission leadership is 2 people. It's your president and your vice president. Management is 8 people. It's your ACT team and your president and vice president. And that policy describes going through appropriate subordinate staff. So in this case, management wouldn't include the commission secretary, for example, because that position doesn't play a role in these kinds of decisions. But management is a group of people, and there was no discussion that I'm aware of amongst management on directing staff not to make a recommendation. So I'm a little frustrated because we don't have a recommendation. So we have a very talented staff here, expert staff, and we are lacking a recommendation on this matter. And I would like to hear your recommendations, or at least your opinions.
Okay. Mr. President, commissioners, how would you like us to proceed? Would you prefer that we defer this to a future meeting to have a fully prepared staff recommendation that gets presented in writing in the normal course as the commission has in the past? Or would you prefer that we just discuss it now as part of the deliberative process?
What would you be most comfortable with?
Mr. President and commissioners, be happy to discuss it with you today if it will not lead to further objections or delay.
I don't have any objection. So I'm asking what you feel comfortable doing.
Yeah. Well, in that case, Mr. President and commissioners, I do think that this boils down to competing methods of statutory interpretation. On the one hand, Mr. President, you're correct that Title 69-3-302 provides a plain language description of what that statute applies to. It says that the rates, tolls, or charges set forth in any schedule filed with the commission pursuant to 69-3-301 must become effective and be lawful rates, tolls, or charges for the utility service rendered 9 months after the date upon which the schedule was filed, under the rules of practice and procedure for filing as adopted by the commission or upon commission approval, whichever occurs first, unless the utility waives the 9-month time period. So the discussion that is important there is that the filing made with the commission, that is the initial filing to adjust rates, must include the tariff sheets, and those tariffs must become effective and be lawful rates for service rendered 9 months after the date upon which the schedule was filed. So I certainly appreciate and understand your perspective on why you believe that the settlement rates that were filed have not existed for the full 9 months. That said, the commission also has precedent, as Northwestern discussed in the rate case hearing, specifically that HLH case. HLH is a small water company that petitioned for adjusted rates in front of the commission. That process ended up taking more than 9 months because of some late intervention that happened in that proceeding. And so the commission accepted as a tariff submitted under Section 302, so pursuant to the statute that we just discussed, a settlement rate is something that the utility could in fact self-implement. And so while there is no detailed discussion in the HLH case of what led the commission to that particular conclusion, I would submit that it is designed to avoid what would otherwise be an absurd result, where the utility is required to implement a rate that is greater than the utility is in fact asking for, a rate that would presumably not be in the interests of the customers any more than it's in the interests of the utility. And so the competing rules of statutory interpretation in a nutshell here are, on one hand, following the plain language of the statute. And on the other hand, avoiding interpretations that lead to absurd results. And so, again, while HLH doesn't provide much detail on how it arrived at that particular conclusion that Section 302 applied to settlement rates, my understanding, based on the circumstances, is that the commission was trying to avoid an interpretation that would lead to an absurd result that causes rates to be artificially high, higher than the utility and higher than the customers would have wanted. So in balancing those two different modes of statutory interpretation, those two rules of statutory interpretation, it is ultimately a question for the commission to resolve. But to depart from the precedent that was established in the HLH case, the commission has to provide a reasoned basis for the departure from precedent. And in this particular circumstance, given Northwestern's posture, given the fact that no party in this proceeding has advocated for a rate as high as Northwestern's originally proposed rate at this point, now that Northwestern has entered into a settlement agreement, I would submit to you that it is better to avoid the result where the rates are higher, and it is better to follow the precedent established in the HLH rate case.
Any questions? Commissioner Bukacek.
I'm all for avoiding absurdity.
Anything else?
If there's no further questions for staff, I'll make a motion.
Commissioner Pinochi?
I have no comment at this point.
Okay.
Wait, Mr. President, it's been a while. Did you make a motion?
Not yet.
Okay, I wanted to see. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay.
Okay. I think on the short end of it, and there's plenty here to go through, I don't think that even though the HLH case might be the only precedent, I think it is a very poor precedent. And I see by your nod of your hair but the nod of your head that you agree it might not be the world's best. And here's why I don't think it's anywhere near high quality precedent. This case was filed in 9/28/18. The MCC intervened in 10/26/18, so that would be 1 month later. In 1/28/19, so that's a couple months later, MCC and HLH all issued an all issues settlement, and the new rate the new rate was requested. About a year later, it came the final ruling, so your 9 months was in there. 2/4/2019, property owners asked for intervention. And that's the bugaboo of the whole 69-3-302. You got this 9 months, all kind of things that can come in there to put you over. And that would be this case. 6/5, they had an evidentiary hearing. The homeowners did not show up. 6/2019, the commission receives an all-party stipulation, which changed the revenue requirement with an increase of $120,000. June 28th, so this is all basically in 1 year. 2019, HLH self-implemented the stipulated rates, and then the PSC had a final ruling of 1/23/2020 of the new rates. Throughout its life, this thing was uncontested. Everybody agreed. Clear back in 1/28, all the issues were settled. The PSC had nothing to rule on. It was an uncontested case. I doubt seriously that they saw then what could happen in 2025 with the filing the way this thing has worked out. So I don't find it to be particularly high quality guide to what's going on here. The question, to my way of thinking, is, and if you would bear with me just a little bit here, I'm really tired because I was up all night doing this. The HLH case is very different from Northwestern Energy's demand to implement a different rate to replace the current one. The stipulations were agreed to by all and never challenged by the PSC. I don't think there's a single penny in this rate case that isn't contested. That's very different. The HLH stipulations did not come after a full rate case. This one did. And were offered without evidence as to the accuracy of the numbers. Rather, in this case, the numbers were challenged during the rate case, never refuted. Therefore, it is rational to assume that the rate decrease may be illusory and an increase is simply stalled until the PCAM true-up. This commission cannot sign off on unsubstantiated numbers. So Northwestern Energy has not met its burden of proof. This burden did not exist before the hearing and its sworn testimony, as this demand relies on that testimony verification is required. Demand being your view of this, because they didn't ask the way HLH did it. We're going to do this. Very different. The HLH was not a case in controversy as the Northwestern Energy case is. But the question before the commission today is if a subsequent rate filing begins anew the 9-month wait. Plain wording of the statute, it does. The wording of the law, MCA 693302, is clear, must become effective 9 months after the date upon which the schedule was filed. We have a new schedule. That's not in controversy. This new rate was filed recently and so must wait the 9 months to be effective or when the commission issues a final order in this rate case, which hopefully will be before the 9 months are up. I'm getting old doing this. The commission handling the HLH case had no reason to be concerned about the stipulated rates, as there was no case in controversy to rule on, nor could the commission imagine the abuse of this statute that could play out 5 years later. So I find it incumbent on this commission to recognize that multiple new filings are not covered in the MCA as merely supplemental, nor contemplated or attempted in the HLH case, so the question is not answered or precedential to this case. Therefore, I offer a motion that staff process the red line tariff and accept the new filing as allowed by law and stipulate that it becomes effective in 9 months or when the case is settled, either per the commission, which is exactly what the statute says, or the courts, depending on what Northwestern decides to do. This would return the rate to the interim rate set by the commission last December. It's not a ridiculous outcome of higher rates. It's a matter of we go with the commission and its ruling that the interims would be as they are. We simply return to that with the red line because the red line takes away the current interim and we return to the base. If this commission decides it wants to offer more, if we want to do $4 or $3 or $5, we can do that. In the meantime, we are 3 weeks away or a little less from the filings of Northwestern from the rate case. They can build a case for this in that and give us some substantial numbers that are proven. A month after that, the interveners have to have their final filing. After that, it's Katie bar the door. And the question will be, do we accept the settlement? Do we not accept the settlements? What do we do? This will be resolved quickly. At $4 per meter, 400,000 meters, it's about $1.6 million per month. I don't think Northwestern is going to wilt up and dry on the vine, waiting for the final ruling on the case they requested. So that's my motion.
Well, that's your motion?
My motion
that
is
was a very long, that was more like a resolution.
well, it's both. At the end, I said, therefore, I offer a motion that staff process the red line tariff and accept the new following as allowed by law and stipulate that it becomes effective in 9 months or when the case is settled either per the commission or per the courts. This would return the rate case to the rate set by the commission last December. So take out that last sentence, and that's my motion.
Mr. President,
Sir.
I'll second second that motion. I'd like to hear. some
We have a
more.
motion, we have a second. Is there discussion?
Who seconded the motion?
Commissioner Panoche?
Commissioner Panoche, did you second the motion?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Mr. President, I'd like to ask our staff's opinion on whether that's feasible or appropriate under the law.
Mr. President, Madam Vice President, I see a potential point of confusion, at least for me, in President Molnar's motion with respect to the notion that processing the red line version of the tariff with a prospective effective date 9 months from now would take us back to the interim rates approved in December. I don't think that's correct because Northwestern has already self-implemented, as it's statutorily permitted to do, its original application rates. Those are the rates that are currently in effect. And under the statute, they're lawful rates. Northwestern is seeking to adjust those rates through what it's characterizing as a second implementation of that statute, given the commission's precedent. So the way I see it, even if the commission were to approve this motion, I don't think that the result is to take the rates back to what they were in December of 2024. If I understood what the motion was.
Don't feel so alone, if I might.
Okay, with that response, I'd like to make a substitute motion, and if it gets a second, I'd like to address why. And that substitute motion is to interpret the reference to uncontested rate schedules in section 2.5 of the Commission's internal policy manual to include rate schedules submitted pursuant to Montana Code annotated 69-3-302. If there's a second, I'd like to address it.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion?
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. And I see where you're trying to go. Back to the rates, the tariff that the commission approved last November or December. I don't think we can get there from here, though. And so, first of all, I agree with our chief legal counsel's opinion that to interpret the statute to mean that the commission could not adjust rates downward to the level that was most recently requested by the utility. I don't see the statute requiring us to hold fast to the high statute that the utility put in at first when they've come back, and the Montana Consumer Council has also concurred in that settlement price. And the net effect, if my motion is passed today, is that we don't have to hold this up. The staff can simply process the review and process the tariff filing, and the rates would automatically be adjusted downward to the benefit of the ratepayers. And also, I think it would be in keeping with healthy business practices for our regulated utility to be stopped from implementing rates that are much higher than they have agreed to collect, and to keep them in this position, which they put themselves into, to keep them from the position of having to overcollect from customers and then have to refund the customers with nearly 10% interest later. So I just think it is a bit of a conundrum, and I appreciate the effort and the work and the research you've done, and I see where you're trying to go, and I don't I commend you for that. I just don't think we can get there from here. So I'd like to see if we can just go ahead and allow staff to file the tariff, and immediately customers will be able to see reduced rates. The company will stop overcharging, and will be a lot closer to what I believe will be the end result, hopefully when the rate case is finally settled, Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to respond to that unless somebody else
I
wanted to jump
just wanted
in
to say
here.
something.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. So in the second full paragraph on page 2, it puts it in context. During the first day of the evidentiary hearing of Northwestern's application, CEO Brian Burr testified that Northwest was willing to reduce its self-implemented rates to the levels Northwest requested in the electric settlement. So that makes it very clear that what Will's interpretation is correct, and your interpretation of going back to December is not correct. This is the context in which this came up, correct?
Mr. President, Commissioner Bukacek, yes, yeah, that paragraph of the staff memo discusses how this came about.
So Will is clearly correct.
Is that a statement or a question? So that was a statement?
Mr. Rosequist's interpretation is correct, and yours, Mr. President, is incorrect.
Okay, let's go with this. Far be it for me to say that Mr. Byrd ever had a self-serving statement. Period. It says in the law that charges, tolls for the utility service rendered 9 months after the date which the schedule was filed under the rules of practice and procedure for filing as adopted by the commission or upon commission approval, whichever comes first. That's what we're doing today. We are determining whether or not we approve this and it goes forward, or we don't approve it, or we approve it with my stipulations. With all due respect for Will, who knows more about this than I do. His problem is he's an honest man. We've covered this before. And it's tough to take an honest man assumes everybody's honest. A crook, not so much. That's why Will can't take me. But the fact is clear. If we take off the red line, we are now back to the first. Is that appropriate? I think so. Will Northwestern think so? I doubt it. Will it go to court? Maybe that's where this gets settled. Because until we get something definitive, it's either the legislature in 18 months, or it's squabbling here for 18 months, or the court rules.
Or the commission passes the motion and simply moves on with the reduced rates until we can conclude the case.
Well, that's my concern. Remember, I said it might be illusory. During the hearing, we had quite a bit of testimony that whether you were looking at rates or the Yellowstone gas plant, the PCAM adjustments determine the rates in the last quarter of the year. All of these will come back because their forward-looking analysis, which is challenged by quite a few, disappears in the true-up. So the rate increase can easily move from July 2nd, which is when I think this takes effect, to October 1st, December 1st, whenever they get done with that. So what I'm saying is it's illusory. Mr. Byrd sat right there and said, I'm doing this when we were talking about the $18. I'm doing this to protect my company. 2 weeks later, he doesn't need the 18 bucks. I have to assume he knows more about the money he needs and where it's going to come from. And it's going to come from ratepayers. Whether he gets it in PCAM, or he gets it in a rate increase, after a rate decrease, which can easily be a communications tool. They're getting beat up for what they've done. Now suddenly the good guys, but the PCAM will determine it, not necessarily the rates. So I'm saying, let's go with our interim, which is actually a rate decrease. If Northwestern doesn't want to wait a couple of months to find out what we do, they can take us to court. If they don't like what we do, they're going to take us to court. Somebody's going to take Yellowstone to court. It's my job to build as good a record as I can so that we are not overturned or we do not make a mistake. And right now, that is, we accept what they sent us, which is a red line version. We didn't ask for it. We do not go with an immediate implementation of their interim. Rather, we go with the interim that we passed and we can defend. And that becomes the rate for the next couple of months while this thing is hammering out. Let's assume I'm wrong. And we split the difference. It's not the $4 he's saying. It's not the $18 he said. It's 10. It's $2.50 a week. It's a small price to pay to find out whether or not every rate case from now on, we have to go through this. If we have the authority to accept and modify and judge, as the statute says, let's do it. They don't like it. Take us to court. They have more attorneys than we do.
Mr. President, would you mind if I ask staff for comments on whether we can implement the December interim rate? Would that be that's really not proper to today's work session, correct? So
Well, it is because I made it in motion.
yeah, but your motion's right now, not the motion before the body, the substitute motion to allow staff to just process this rate reduction tariff is the motion before the body right now. So I'll defer. I saw Commissioner.
Mr. President, I have a question.
Just a second, Commissioner Fielder has the floor for a moment here.
Oh, that's okay. I'm
Okay,
happy to let another commissioner speak.
Commissioner Pinochi.
Seconded your motion. One of the things I mentioned after my second is I wanted to hear some discussion. Before that happened, Commissioner Fielder made a motion for her version. What I would like to happen is Lucas Hamilton to reply to your motion as to way he would like to discuss it, how he views your motion. And then I wanted you to reply to Mr. Lucas's discussion. And I would like to have had that happen before Commissioner Fielder made a motion. That was the purpose of my second, so we could have some discussion on your motion. Is it all right for me to ask for that before we move on to another motion? What are your thoughts?
I believe you can ask any question of Commissioner Fielder, any other commissioner, or any member of staff.
The reason I was thinking this was good to have some discussion about your motion is you have more experience at the commission than any of us. And because of that, I'd like to see what Lucas Hamilton's reply to what you had to say in your motion would be. And then I'd like you to reply to Mr. Lucas's Hamilton's concerns or viewpoints. I have the utmost respect for Lucas Hamilton, as I do you. And I'd like that discussion to take place and wanted that discussion to take place before somebody made another motion. So if I could get that accomplished, that was the whole purpose of my second. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President and Commissioner Pinochi. I'll begin by saying I agree with Will that I don't think it's possible at this juncture to necessarily move back to the commission approved interim rates from December when they became effective, or January 1 when they became effective. In any event, even if it were possible, I think we still run into the problem of Montana Code Annotated 69-3-302 does allow the utility to self-implement their originally proposed rate. So if we tried to adjust the rate back to the commission's approved interim right now, Northwestern could still return to the originally filed rate. I don't think that is, as I understand all the commissioners' positions at this point, reasonably in dispute that they could return to their originally filed rate as a means of still avoiding the regulatory lag that I think that statute was intended to address. So Commissioner Pinocci, does that answer your question?
It does. Now I would like to hear from the president on your comments. President Molnar, your thoughts, please, based on what Lucas Hamilton has said.
I don't know that my thoughts are particularly dissuaded by that comment. The red line, which they filed with us, strikes the existing tariff that they imposed back in first part of May. If we accept that, they're gone. They're the ones that filed it. To say that if we accept the deletion, it doesn't count, to me is quizzical. If, however, Northwestern disagrees, let's go to court and find out. They're the ones that filed the deletion of their existing tariff. If we accept it, there's nothing there. We're back to the original. If the court says you can't do that, a little staff time, we find out, we're done. By then, the case is going on. In the meantime, there's been a small rate decrease. And the, I hate to use the word gotcha, but regulated utilities make demands, come up with new stuff, clog the system, make sure that there's no way on God's green earth you're going to get done in 9 months. It's a game. The game has to stop. And that happens when we stand up and we get a ruling if they decide to go forward with it.
My question to you, Mr. President, is, would you like me to continue to support your motion, or do you like Jennifer Fielder's new motion? Vice President, Commissioner Fielder's motion. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are you should do what you want. On the long term, kind of a longer view, I think this commission's been backing up for a long time. I think that we've become a second office of Northwestern. I think they show up. I think they walk in.
Objection, Mr. President, completely and entirely inappropriate.
Thank you.
Completely.
Thank you for your input.
That's not input. That's a fact.
No, when
It's
I
this
walk
office.
into the conference room, there's nothing but Northwestern people in there, and I'm not aware. I don't know what else to call it.
There are communications that occur and do occur in a professional matter, but if you are making accusations about anybody in this agency being improper, I would ask you to kindly think again.
I didn't mention anybody's name in this agency or even say this agency. I'm saying they show up and they use our system. I would consider the last 8 days of the rate case to be example one. They are acting with impunity. They're using statutes never before used in this way by a utility. They are making demands. They made major rate increases on their own. If that isn't impunity, I don't know what is. For us to say, no, we don't think so. You made the filing. We're going to accept it. We're going to go with the plain wording of the law. I don't think is inappropriate. I think it puts them on notice that if they're going to do this stuff, we will stand up and fight back. We're not just going to say because it's easier or it makes more sense or we may lose in court. We will defend our power, our granted authority, and the ratepayer of Montana can count on us to do that on their behalf. I don't think that that is particularly unilaterally dismissive of anybody in here, in this office. I never
have a
said
question
there
for
were.
staff,
I
Mr.
said they
President.
come in here and they, as Lucas said, and as I've noticed, they didn't ask us to process this as HLH did. They told us. And if we say, oh, okay, I don't know how else to interpret that.
Can I ask staff a question?
Please.
If I'm understanding what President Molnar is saying, it sounds like if we were to go to court, we'd be going to court to try to fight against Montana Code Annotated 69.3.302, because he's saying that they didn't have a right to implement their self-implemented rates. Wouldn't that be correct? I mean, they had, based on Montana Code Annotated, they had a right to do that. Their self-implemented rates. So if we were to go to court, we'd be going to court saying they didn't have a right to do that? Is that the court case he's talking about?
Mr. President, Commissioner Bukacek, as I understand the commission's position right now, there is no dispute that Section 302 allows Northwestern Energy to implement their originally filed rates, right? What was filed upon the completion date of their application back in August of last year. What remains for the commission to decide is whether or not their settlement rates that were submitted to the commission on June 20th fit within that statutory scheme and are therefore an uncontested rate. As I understand President Molnar's motion, which I think I understand a little bit better now based on the discussion, so thank you for that. We would accept red lines with a deferred effective date of 9 months to sort of not accept the revision until 9 months have passed from, let's say, June 20th. I don't know that deferring the effective date of that red line change necessarily means that we have to go backwards to the previously approved interim rate. What we would be replacing at that point is the self-implemented rate, excuse me, that took effect on May 23rd. So beyond that, I don't know what the litigation posture of the parties would be. I think that would take some research and understanding based on the resolution of the commission's action here today. So I wouldn't want to jump ahead of my skis here and give you legal advice about the claims that have not yet been made or may not be made depending on the outcome of the commission's deliberations.
Question, Mr. President.
Yeah, before we get that, if I could jump in on this quick conversation here. I think that Lucas has encapsulated it. I'm not saying they don't have a right to do it. I'm saying they had a right to do it and they did it. That started a 9-month toll. They declared it on the first day of the 9th month, and that was legal. I'm saying that their next utility charge and rate schedule that they file faces the same 9 month because that's what the law says. That's all I'm saying. We keep going back to the red line. The red line says to take out the current one and replace it with this one. I'm saying, fine, it's gone. This one takes effect in 9 months.
Can you?
If the courts want to get into that, that's fine. Lucas is 100% correct. We don't know what, if anything, Northwestern would file. Neither he nor I nor anybody else at this point can speculate and therefore can't give an answer.
Mr. President, could you just explain what you mean by the red line, please, for us?
Sure. The red line, let me find it here for you, is this one, their tariff. You'll see all these things that are deleted. In a good copier, those would be in red. It's labeled as the red line, and they're filing with us. There's 4 titles. This one is titled the red line.
Okay, thank you. A question for staff regarding this. Is this a draft document or is this a final request from the utility?
Mr. President, Vice President Fielder, the red line tariff came in. It was accompanied by an unredlined version of the tariff. The way I would interpret the filing is that they're actually seeking to implement the rates on the unredlined tariff. Those are the new rates that they would like to put in the tariffs. The red line simply shows the changes
Okay,
for clarity.
very good. Thank you. I appreciate the
That's my
clarification.
understanding as well.
Okay. Thanks for that, Mr. President. So I'll bring us back to my motion that we're on now. It's a motion before the body, and that is, can staff process the tariff filing or not? And I move that we allow staff to process the tariff filing so that we can see these rates reduced and see the company stop overcharging customers And I have a question about that since the prospects of litigation have been brought up. Has anyone contested this tariff filing?
Mr. President, Vice President Fielder, it's a good question. This tariff filing that was submitted on June 20th was submitted, as discussed in the opening and as President Molnar just observed, as a tariff letter. So not as a motion necessarily inviting responses from parties.
Okay.
That said, parties have a tendency to respond to these things when they feel like they're out of order. So since June 20th, we have received no filings disputing the tariff letter for what that's worth. Additionally, it's worth noting that Northwestern first requested the revised interim rates before the 9-month period had lapsed on May 23rd. They filed that motion with the commission on April 14th as part of their electric settlement. Under the commission's procedural order and rules, parties are provided an opportunity, a window of time to respond to those sorts of motions. That includes obviously the non-settling parties, since the settling parties agreed to support the motion. So the non-settling parties had an opportunity to respond to that. They did not. And that is one thing that Northwestern Energy noted in its May 19th notice withdrawing the motion, is that they had filed the motion. It was supported by the settling parties, but no non-settling party had opposed the motion.
Okay, so what we have before us with this filing, this tariff filing that I'm recommending we approve or moving to approve, is no parties have opposed it, correct?
Mr. President, Vice President, yes.
It will lower rates for customers effective immediately, July 1, correct?
Mr. President, Vice President, yes, it's effective, as I understand it, based on the request, and Will can correct me if I'm wrong here, when it is approved.
Okay, so is there any downside?
Mr. President, Vice President, I think that's for the commission to judge based on what your interpretation of Section 302 is and of the the value of the HLH precedent.
Okay.
Thank you. Just a comment, if I may. I mean, we as a commission, I feel, are in a difficult spot right here. But at the end of the day, whether you agree with the policy or not, there's still statute in place, and the process is we've got to follow a process. We have to follow the law as a commission, and if regardless of whether you agree or not of how we've got here under this piece of code, the only way that I see that can be fixed is it has to be the right way to do it would be do it through the legislature. And in my mind, that's up to the people of Montana. I mean, if people agree that this law has been implemented and agree with where it's taken, us to where we are now at a decision point, or more importantly, where their rates are being charged by the utility, then that's up to them to work with the legislature through a public process. Or if they don't like the outcome, or they don't feel like they're going to get an outcome that the majority of the people of this state agree with, then it's up to them to elect somebody that will change that piece of code if that's what people more agree or disagree with. And so in my mind, I mean, I wholeheartedly can appreciate and it's where the president's going with this, but I still feel like the pragmatic thing to do is I'm going to support the vice president's substitute motion, and that would be to accept the staff's recommendation. And we've got from now until we come down with a final order on this rate case to try to get it right. But I mean, it's beyond how we personally feel about what's got us here. I think there's a process and law, more importantly, in place that we need to follow. And I've got to agree with staff that there's a statute in place. I mean, I think at a bare minimum, we would, if we rejected this, it would take us back to the law that we're following now based on a piece of code that they filed the motion under, or the interim order under. And I don't, unless there's something that I'm missing, I don't think that we can reject that with the notion that it would take us back to, because that would be sidestepping the piece of law that they're operating under, that they filed that. So I feel like we've got to just let this play itself out. I will be voting for the substitute motion only for those reasons, because we've got a responsibility to follow the law as it now stands. And I think this is the cleanest and best path forward to get us there. Mr. President, I have another question. Would it be out of order to ask or to call for the question on the substitute motion under Robert's rules?
Only if there's no more discussion.
I call for the question.
Mr. President, I will restate the motion since I have it here in writing.
Okay.
For the benefit of the commission, since it's been a very long discussion, and for our staff who are recording this. So I move that the commission interpret the reference to uncontested rate schedules in section 2.5 of the commission's internal policy manual. I believe that's the delegation of authority policy, to include rate schedules submitted pursuant to Montana Code annotated 69-3-302. And again, Mr. President, this will allow staff to go ahead and process that tariff filing.
So have I been precluded from discussing this?
I'm not the parliamentarian.
You're the one that made the motion. You can either withdraw it or you can say no. It's up to you.
The question has been called, Mr. President, and this motion has been properly restated, and it is now time for the commission to vote. There's been ample time for discussion.
That's probably a fact. All those in favor of was yours the substitute motion or the first motion?
A substitute motion of Vice President Fielder.
Oh, the substitute motion of Vice President Fielder, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, with that, if we could, I'd like to go back a little bit to where I was chastised for.
If we could just, I think the motion vote has to be announced for the
Oh.
record.
3-2.
Thank you.
If I could go back a moment to where I was chastised for asking staff to not bring a recommendation and not going through some chain of command that somehow Lana's and who answers to me is more in charge of this question than I am. I was asked, do you want staff to have a recommendation? And I said no. And I explained at the time, and I'll explain it now. I said that this is a very important precedent question with almost no precedents out there to go with. We make, quoting myself, a big boy wage. It's a big boy job. Staff should not do it back in their offices. The public should see this. I don't apologize for that. I think we are a better commission for having had this discussion. I think the people are better served when we do this in the open and not have staff do it. I would say that Lucas was somewhat hostile to some of my ideas. He usually is. However, he brought it to me. This is big. What do you want to do with it? So I commend him for that. Most people think they're going to get disagreed with. Just don't bring it up. He brought it forward for the same reasons that I wanted it here. The commission should have a say. This question and Lucas's views on this have been in many emails over the last few days. No commissioner was blindsided. Any could have asked. Any could have done what they wanted to. I wasn't trying to hide anything. And I never have. So with that, the motion has carried. Sorry. The date of the next business meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, July 8th, 2025. Seeing no further business to come before the commission, for the record, the time is 2:55 p.m. and the date is July 1, 2025. This meeting is adjourned.